We have a lot of NHL trade and free agent rumors to discuss today. A lot of it revolving around the goaltending carousel we're going to see here in the coming days in the NHL. We're talking about goalies like Jonas Korpisalo possibly going to the Leafs. And what does that mean for Freddie Andersen? Could Marc-Andre Fleury find his way back to Pittsburgh? Could Henrik Lundqvist go to Washington? Well, Matt Murray's going to be on the move and lots of interest there. Plus, we have the latest on Alex Pietrangelo and Taylor Hall as well. We'll jump into this big update coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have a lot to cover today. There's a lot of updates on what teams are looking at, what goaltenders, and what kind of movement we're likely to see here in the coming days. We're only a couple days from the NHL draft, less than a week away from free agency, so we're about to fully enter the NHL silly season where we see all kinds of trades and signings. So as I keep saying here, buckle up for the news cycle. It's going to be pretty heavy here in the coming days, and I'll do my best to keep you all up to date with all the latest news and rumors floating around the league here. So let's get started with the news on Toronto. This comes from the fourthperiod.com and Dave Pagnotta, who's reported here that the Leafs and Blue Jackets have had conversations around their goaltenders, primarily Jonas Korpisalo being the main target of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, of course, they know each other quite well from their recent playoff series where the Blue Jackets defeated the Maple Leafs. They get to see firsthand just how good Korpisalo was. He had a solid year, regular season, and solid playoff run, getting the bulk of the playoff playing time for Columbus. Of course, he comes with an excellent contract, 2 years, under $3 million. It would be a major savings if the Leafs could get that kind of goaltending for that kind of price on their roster. It's led to believe that obviously Columbus is looking for scoring help on the wings and at center ice, and a combination of Andreas Johnsson and Alex Kerfoot would be the main types of players that the Leafs would be interested in moving. So, can't help but wonder what kind of package would be going there. Clearly, there could be other pieces as well. Maybe Columbus tries to pry away that first-round pick from Toronto that they got from the Penguins. That's a possibility as well. So Columbus could grab themselves another young, solid prospect. Hard to say exactly what the package would be if a deal gets done. But no surprise that Toronto continues to shop around, trying to find goaltending upgrades, some cheaper options where they can save some money and possibly even get at least the same or better goaltending that they had from Freddie Andersen over the last few years. Now, some extra details on this potential trade with Columbus. Obviously, like I said, it would be Johnsson or Kerfoot likely going back, but another piece could be coming with Korpisalo from Columbus would be the contract of Brandon Dubinsky. So, obviously, Dubinsky's a player who's under contract for one more year at $5.8 million. Likely is not going to play, and when I say likely, it's pretty much a guarantee that he is going to be on LTIR. So therefore, that gives Kyle Dubas that contract that I mentioned a long time ago, and I know some people told me that the Leafs were done doing that, and that we wouldn't be seeing any more kind of loopholes, if you will, for them to be able to spend over the cap. But this is what they do in Toronto. They have deep pockets, and they're not afraid to find as many loopholes and work around the CBA as much as possible to get the best team on the ice. So if they did that, like I said, they could take the cap savings from the Andersen and Korpisalo difference, spend that on the blue line or other areas that they need to improve the team, bring in the Dubinsky contract, spend right to the cap, and then bring in somebody above that as well so that they can spend basically almost $6 million over. So clearly, that's an option for Kyle Dubas in Toronto. They take on a bad contract as well as a good contract to get some value going out the other way. Like I said, I'm not sure exactly what the return would be. We don't have details on that, but you'd have to think Johnsson or Kerfoot at the very least are in play, and they're likely more, maybe even a first-round pick. So we'll see what happens, but if a deal happens between Columbus and Toronto, it could certainly be pretty significant here. Now, of course, this move, if it did indeed happen, would be a spin-off effect of Freddie Andersen getting traded. Obviously, Andersen comes with a significant reduced actual cash payout for salary this year because of the big bonus he was already paid. It would save any team acquiring him a lot of actual cash out. They could get a pretty solid year out of Andersen without having to pay very much. And then, of course, they have the option to consider extending him, trading him at the deadline, or whatever the might happen there with the future, depending on how things work out. But one of the teams that's been inquiring a lot on Freddie Andersen with the Leafs, and they had a lot of discussions in the past. I think it's been a little while since this happened, but was the Carolina Hurricanes. They've had a lot of interest there, and of course, they're looking to likely not come back with a tandem of Reimer and Mrazek. Reimer is certainly going to be easier and more likely to be traded, so it's quite possible that happens. And of course, Andersen could certainly work with Mrazek, or they might even move both of them and bring in Andersen and somebody else. Hard to say what the Hurricanes did, But the reason this trade has not happened as of yet was the last time these teams engaged in conversations, the Leafs were trying to get Dougie Hamilton for Freddie Andersen. So as much as I understand why Toronto would want Dougie Hamilton, be that big right shot defenseman, he had a phenomenal year last year, a good solid guy, makes a lot of sense why they want him, but Columbus politely hung up the phone and said, no thank you, we're not trading Dougie Hamilton for possibly only 1 year of Frederik Andersen. Now, could I see Carolina trading a defenseman? It's quite possible. They have guys like Jake Bean, who's been primarily an AHL defenseman, who needs an opportunity. They've got Hayden Fleury looking for an expanded role. And they still have a lot of veterans playing ahead of them as well in their lineup, even after trading Joel Edmondson earlier to the Habs. So I wouldn't be shocked to see Carolina move a defenseman, but I don't think it would be Hamilton. And if they're not going to trade Hamilton for a player with 1 year left on his contract. Now, could they move Hamilton? I wouldn't completely rule it out, but it's going to have to be a significant return unless they're getting a player like a Patrick Laine or something. I just don't see that happening for the Hurricanes. So I understand why that deal has not happened. The asking price would certainly have to be a fair bit different. Maybe they do get a defenseman out of Carolina, but it's certainly not going to be Hamilton. That's for sure. So we'll see what happens in Toronto, but we very well could see Andersen on the move to Carolina or elsewhere, and a guy like Korpisalo or somebody who can give them great goaltending for a cheaper price come in and save the Leafs some cap space and give them some more much-needed flexibility. Now, speaking of goaltenders on the move, sticking with this pattern, Henrik Lundqvist, formerly of the New York Rangers, which seems really funny to say, could very well be a fit with the Washington Capitals. Elliot Friedman reports here in his latest Saturday headline segment with Chris Johnston, indicating that he believes the Capitals would have interest, assuming they don't bring back Braden Holtby, which at this point is pretty likely. Holtby is just not going to be able to be a contract they can really afford any longer. And with Lundqvist being bought out and being a UFA, of course, he likely would accept a 1 or 2 year contract at much less money. So it would make a lot of sense to bring in a guy who's got a ton of experience, give him a shot at winning the Stanley Cup. It gives them an experienced goaltender that they would have had in a guy like Holtby who could work with Samsonov to be a good mentor and be able to take on a more of a workload in a condensed schedule. Of course, Hank's used to playing a lot of games, so that certainly helps them in that regard, and there very well could be a good fit. Now, of course, we also mentioned Vegas as being a possibility for Lundqvist as well, and I wouldn't rule that out. But if he continues to play in the NHL, it only makes sense that he plays for a contender, because why else would he continue to play besides chasing the Stanley Cup? So he's not going to go to a team that doesn't look like they're anywhere close to winning at this point. Sticking with Vegas as we continue to talk about them now, of course, we saw the Robin Lehner signing, so there's a lot more talks intensifying about what's going to happen to Marc-Andre Fleury. Chris Johnston on Saturday Headlines indicates he fully believes that Fleury has played his last game in a Golden Knights uniform, and he's definitely going to be moved. But Vegas appears to be somewhat reluctant or unwilling to either buy him out or to trade him with some salary retained on their book. So basically what they're trying to do at this point is facilitate a trade involving a third team, just like they did when they picked up Robin Lehner from Chicago, where they had Toronto be the third team. They retained a little bit of salary and thus got an asset, a draft pick in return for doing that. So they very well could look to teams like Detroit or Ottawa who have all kinds of space and are basically collecting assets to go through their rebuild right now. So maybe Vegas gives up either a pretty good pick, maybe second, third round selection, or maybe we're talking about a prospect, something to that effect would go to those teams. They would retain a bit of salary on Fleury's contract, probably a couple $1 million, and then he could be traded maybe at a $4 to $5 million cap hit, which would certainly be a lot more likely to happen. Now, of course, wouldn't completely rule out Fleury going back to Pittsburgh. I know Rob Rossi, who covers the Penguins, has a recent article on that, discussing that main possibility, that he would not rule out the possibility of Fleury returning to team with Tristan Jarry, who they just signed to a 3-year contract, and we could have Fleury go back. Now, another team that I wouldn't rule out as well in the Fleury situation, as well as the Matt Murray situation in Pittsburgh. Like I said, it's a goaltending carousel here. They're basically playing musical chairs to some degree, so try to keep up, because I know it can be confusing if you don't listen real close. But ultimately, Minnesota's a team who's supposedly trading Devin Dubnyk to San Jose. That trade is not complete yet, but it's likely to go through from what we're hearing. So Minnesota's going to be looking for a starting goaltender. You get Bill Guerin being the GM in Minnesota. You get Jim Rutherford in Pittsburgh, both extremely familiar with Marc-Andre Fleury. So obviously they right now appear to be the teams that are both looking at Murray as well as Fleury in the case of Guerin. So Guerin, in Minnesota trades out Devin Dubnyk to San Jose, which we'll wait for confirmation on, but that likely happens. And then, like I said, he could very well acquire either Matt Murray from Pittsburgh or Marc-Andre Fleury from Vegas and have a goaltender that he's extremely familiar with that, you know, to can kind of take over the starting job in Minnesota, or Fleury goes back to Pittsburgh. That's a possibility here as well. I think Minnesota might have an easier time getting that deal done right now, but, you know, Rutherford's going to be aggressive in that sense. And like I said, Pittsburgh and Minnesota could still possibly hook up on Murray going to Minnesota. But, you know, the asking price is at least a first-round pick right now. And right now teams are somewhat reluctant to pay that, given the fact there's so many guys on the free agent market that they could possibly get for less money. So we could have a lot of goaltending changes. Like I said, Marc-Andre Fleury could leave Vegas. He could either go to Minnesota or Pittsburgh, as right now that's what the rumors are. Then, of course, Vegas could then in turn pick up a guy like Henrik Lundqvist if he doesn't go to Washington. So they're kind of the teams involved there. And then you got, you know, so much other stuff on the go here. You get Columbus, Toronto. Now, it's going to be a crazy season with goaltenders changing uniforms like crazy here, probably over the next week or so. Now, sticking with the Vegas Golden Knights here, we have more of a talk around defenseman Alex Pietrangelo. Now, I've seen some reports from Larry Brooks of the New York Post indicating that many believe that Alex Pietrangelo is likely heading to Vegas. And at this point, he even reports that the St. Louis Blues might be willing and able to file tampering charges against Vegas, that they feel that there might already be something going on that shouldn't be behind the scenes to kind of set this move up. So we'll see if Pietrangelo does indeed go to Vegas. But obviously moving Fleury is going to be one of the obstacles, but it's not going to be the only one they need to do. If they can bring in a guy like Alex Pietrangelo, they probably can afford to getting him paid a little bit less than a lot of teams because of the difference in the income taxes. But still, like, it's going to be a significant contract no matter how you shake it. But if the Blues are kind of feeling like there's some tampering going on, you can't help but wonder how that's going to impact things. And if you know, the Vegas Golden Knights or Pietrangelo's camp or anybody there could kind of get into some hot water over that possibility. But apparently the Blues seem to be almost convinced that Petro himself is going to Vegas. So we'll see what happens. Many NHL insiders are reporting that Vegas is the top favorite team to land him, even more so than his hometown Toronto Maple Leafs. So we'll see what happens on Pietrangelo's front. But right now, that's what signs are pointing to, is a deal with the Golden Knights. And lastly here, Chris Johnston of Sportsnet on the Saturday Headlines is reporting that Taylor Hall is very, very likely to take a short 1 or 2 year contract for an opportunity to play a role on a big team that has a shot at a Stanley Cup. He really wants to win, as we've talked about before. NHL insiders really feel that he's one of the top guys who could take a shorter term contract to bet on himself and give him a chance to win and get in some serious playoff action. I would have to think a team like Colorado would be right at the top of that list. I really don't see a team like Edmonton being able to acquire him for having a reunion there. I guess crazier things have happened, but I really don't see that option being very likely. I know a lot of people have linked him to the Islanders in the past, and I'm not really sure about that either, without seeing the Islanders start to make moves to clear some cap space. I'm not really sure that's a likely option either. Personally, I think I've been saying for a long time that I think the Avalanche would be a great team for him on a short-term basis. Obviously, they're going to have deals for a guy like Cale Makar and an extension for Landeskog in a couple of years' time, like McKinnon. So, like, they don't want to get tied up with somebody like that too long, but they could afford to give him a fairly substantial salary on a short-term contract. So, Taylor Hall will be a player handling things like we saw with John Tavares likely a couple of years ago, where he's likely going to accept interviews, basically, or meetings with a certain number of teams. And he's going to want to hear from them, basically, how they see him fitting in, what kind of role he's going to have, talk more about the organization, the lifestyle, etc. in the city. And then, of course, at the same time, make a contract offer and see how that's going to go. So we'll see. Hall will certainly be one of the more interesting players to follow here as we get closer to October 9th free agency. So let me know your thoughts on everything we talked about today. I know it's a crazy goaltending world right now, and we're bound to see lots of change. So let me know where you think some of these guys are going to end up, and we'll discuss further in the comments. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.